Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the shadows of medieval superstition, a world where fear had rules, luck had instructions, and absolutely everything meant something. A place where spilling salt wasn't clumsy, it was dangerous. Where a black cat wasn't cute, it was a legal warning. And where your own body, hair, blood, breath, and mane was treated like a walking magical object that needed constant supervision. If you've ever knocked on wood without thinking, avoided a certain number, felt uneasy during a full moon, or kept something just in case, even though you don't fully believe in it, congratulations. You've inherited medieval software running quietly in the background of your brain. Tonight's story is about why those instincts never left. Before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of slow, unsettling history. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and whether your family has any strange rules you still follow without knowing why. The kind that sound silly out loud, but feel wrong to break. Now dim the lights. Let the room go quiet. Put on a fan or some soft background noise, something steady, something familiar. Because for medieval people, silence was never empty. It was full of things watching. Settle in. We're about to find out why medieval fear didn't disappear. It just learned how to dress modern. You wake up in the medieval world already watched. Not by people, not exactly, but by things you cannot see. Things that move through the air, linger in corners, press against doors, ride the wind. The medieval mind did not believe the world was empty space filled with objects. It believed the world was crowded, packed tight with invisible forces brushing past you every moment of the day. Air itself was alive. Wind carried intention. Shadows were not just the absence of light, but places where something might pause and wait. Nothing happened by accident. A sudden sickness was not random. A spoiled loaf of bread was not bad luck. A cracked cup, a failed harvest, a child crying in the night, each event had a reason, and the reason almost always lived beyond the visible world. Medieval people believed that unseen forces constantly interfered with human life. Angels nudged events toward salvation. Demons pushed things toward ruin. Spirits lingered where emotions were strong. God watched everything. Saints intervened when properly asked. And between all of them was humanity, fragile and exposed, walking through a universe that could not be trusted. This is why medieval life was built on rituals so small they seem meaningless today. Whispered words, tiny gestures, repeated habits done without thinking. These were not traditions. They were defenses. If you sneezed, it meant your soul had briefly loosened its grip on your body. For a split second, something could slip inside. This is why people immediately said a blessing. Not politeness, protection. You were sealing the body again before anything noticed the opening. That reflex never left us. You still say, "Bless you," without thinking. Even if you don't believe in souls or demons, your mouth performs the ritual anyway. 1,000-year-old reflex surviving in modern lungs. Wood was considered alive. Trees had spirits. Forests listened. Touching wood was believed to anchor you back into the natural order, grounding bad luck before it finished forming. If you tempted fate by boasting or speaking too confidently about the future, you reached for wood to cancel the attention you'd just attracted. That habit didn't disappear either. You still knock on wood. Even people who mock superstition do it. Fingers tap desks. Knuckles brush tables. Plastic gets substituted when wood isn't available, because the motion matters more than the logic. Medieval superstition was not about ignorance. It was about survival in a world that did not explain itself. They believed names carried power. To name something directly was to invite it closer. This is why death was rarely named outright. You spoke around it. You softened it. You used euphemisms. You still do. People believed that saying something good too loudly invited envy from unseen forces. Happiness needed to be hidden. Success had to be downplayed. Pride was dangerous, not because it offended morality, but because it attracted attention. This fear still lingers. When something good happens, you lower your voice. You hesitate before celebrating. You add qualifiers. If all goes well. Hopefully. Let's not jinx it. That word jinx comes from the same medieval belief that fortune was a fragile thing, easily shattered by being noticed. The medieval world assumed the universe listened. Storms were not weather. Storms were reactions. Thunder was anger rolling across the sky. Lightning was punishment with direction. If hail destroyed crops, it meant someone had failed spiritually. A forgotten prayer, a broken vow, a sin left unconfessed. Villages didn't ask why storms came. They asked who caused them. That instinct remains. When disaster strikes today, people still search for moral reasons. Someone must have done something wrong. Someone must be to blame. Randomness feels unbearable. Medieval superstition trained humanity to demand meaning even where none exists. The night was the most dangerous time, not because of animals or thieves alone, but because darkness belonged to everything else. The sun was believed to suppress unseen forces. When it disappeared, protections weakened. This is why so many medieval rituals involved light. Candles weren't just practical. They were barriers. A flame created a circle of safety. It pushed back shadows. It reminded spirits they were being watched. Even now, people feel safer with a light on. A small lamp in a dark room feels comforting in a way logic cannot explain. The body remembers something the mind no longer believes. Corners were dangerous. Doorways were dangerous. Thresholds were dangerous. These were places between spaces, and anything between was vulnerable. This is why salt was placed at doors. Why iron objects hung near entrances. Why certain words were spoken when crossing from one room to another. Salt symbolized purity and permanence. Iron repelled what did not belong to the natural world. These materials weren't chosen randomly. They were believed to irritate invisible beings, like static in the air. Spilling salt was dangerous because it broke a protective barrier. You immediately threw some over your shoulder, not theatrically, but urgently. You were blinding whatever was standing behind you long enough to escape notice. That gesture still exists. You spill salt and your body reacts before your brain does. Even if you laugh at yourself, the movement happens. The superstition outlived the belief system that created it. Mirrors were terrifying objects, not because of vanity, but because reflections were thought to be unstable copies of the soul. Breaking a mirror damaged more than glass. It fractured something spiritual. The 7 years of bad luck wasn't arbitrary. It was tied to the belief that the soul took 7 years to heal. That fear never fully faded. Broken mirrors still feel wrong. Even people who don't believe in luck hesitate around shattered reflections. Something about it feels personal, invasive, unsettling. The medieval world believed that sound carried power. Bells didn't just tell time. They scared things away. Church bells were rung during storms, not to mark the hour, but to push lightning elsewhere. The vibrations were thought to scramble malevolent forces moving through the air. Noise was protection. Even today, people associate silence with danger. Empty rooms feel heavier. Loud music feels safer at night. Noise reassures the nervous system in ways logic cannot explain. The dead were never fully gone. Souls lingered near familiar places, especially if their deaths were sudden, violent, or improper. This is why burial rituals mattered so much. A mistake could trap a soul between worlds, where it would wander, watching the living with unfinished business. This belief shaped funeral behavior that still survives. We lower voices around the dead. We feel uncomfortable eating near graves. We instinctively show respect to burial spaces, even if we don't believe in ghosts. The medieval fear of restless spirits trained people to behave carefully around death. Numbers carried weight. Certain numbers were stable. Others were dangerous. 3 represented balance. 7 represented divine order. 13 was imbalance, excess, something that broke symmetry. That discomfort persists. People still avoid 13. Hotels skip floors. Events hesitate to label rows or seats. Even skeptics participate because the number feels wrong in a way that's difficult to articulate. Colors mattered too. Red repelled harm. Blue protected against envy. Green was unpredictable, sometimes sacred, sometimes cursed. Black absorbed forces. White reflected them. These associations quietly shape modern symbolism. Emergency signs use red. Medical environments use white. Protective symbols are often blue. Even branding leans on medieval color instincts without realizing it. Children were considered especially vulnerable. Their souls were not fully anchored yet. This is why charms were tied to cradles, why iron pins were hidden in clothing, why prayers were spoken constantly over infants. Modern parenting echoes this fear. Baby monitors, night lights, protective rituals disguised as safety measures. The instinct to guard children from unseen harm is ancient, deeply embedded. Dreams were messages, not metaphors, not imagination. Messages. Ignoring them was dangerous. Repeating them could summon what they warned about. Even now, people search dreams for meaning. Bad dreams linger longer than logic allows. A nightmare can ruin a day, even when reason says it shouldn't. The medieval world trained humanity to treat the invisible as real, not metaphorically real, practically real. You acted as if unseen forces existed, because acting otherwise felt reckless. And while science replaced demons with bacteria, angels with probability, curses with psychology, the behaviors remained. We still whisper around good fortune. We still hesitate before celebrating. We still perform tiny rituals we claim not to believe in. We still fear silence at night. We still feel watched in empty spaces. We still protect thresholds. We still talk to the unseen when we're afraid. The medieval universe never fully left us. It simply learned how to hide inside habit, instinct, and reflex, quietly shaping how we move through the world without ever asking permission. You learn very quickly in the medieval world that your body does not belong entirely to you. It is not just flesh and bone. It is a container, a bundle of symbols, a collection of dangerous materials that can be stolen, copied, misused, or turned against you long after they leave your skin. Your body is a magical object, and every part of it matters. Hair is not dead matter. It remembers you. Medieval people believed hair carried identity, intention, and strength. That is why cutting it was never casual. Loose hair was power untethered. Hair could be burned to destroy influence, buried to bind fate, or stolen to cause harm. If someone obtained your hair, they could reach you without touching you. Distance didn't matter. Walls didn't matter. Locks didn't matter. This fear shaped daily behavior. Hair clippings were never left behind. They were burned in hearth fires, buried deep in the earth, or hidden where no one else could reach them. Public barbers were distrusted not because of hygiene, but because they collected what should never be shared. A careless haircut could hand your essence to the wrong person. The anxiety never truly vanished. People still feel exposed when their hair falls out. Baldness triggers fear that goes beyond appearance. Hair loss feels like loss of vitality, loss of self, loss of control. Modern language still reflects this. Letting your hair down, splitting hairs, bad hair day. Hair is treated as emotional territory, not just biology. Blood was even more powerful. Blood was life itself, visible proof that the soul inhabited the body. Spilled blood wasn't just injury, it was leakage, power escaping. This is why blood oaths mattered. Mixing blood wasn't symbolic. It created a permanent bond. Two lives entangled at the most fundamental level. Blood was also dangerous when mishandled. A drop of blood could be used to curse. Menstrual blood was feared and revered simultaneously. It was associated with fertility, transformation, and disruption. Medieval texts warned that menstrual blood could dull weapons, sour wine, and ruin crops. Not because it was dirty, but because it was powerful and uncontrolled. Even today, blood carries unease. We avert our eyes. We react viscerally. We still talk about bloodlines, bad blood, blood ties. Family is defined by it. Loyalty is defined by it. Violence feels more real when blood is visible. That reaction is older than medicine. Nails were also dangerous. Fingernails and toenails were not waste. They were fragments of the self. If someone gathered your nail clippings, they could influence your health, your sleep, your luck. Nails were trimmed carefully and disposed of deliberately. Some buried them. Some burned them. Some hid them in walls. Losing control of your nails meant losing control of your boundaries. This belief lingers in odd places. People feel uncomfortable biting their nails in public. Nail clippings left behind feel vaguely wrong. The idea of someone else collecting your DNA through nails triggers modern paranoia that mirrors medieval fear almost perfectly. Teeth held special significance. Baby teeth were not trash. They were proof of growth, transformation, survival. Losing them marked dangerous transitions. The body was changing, which meant it was vulnerable. Teeth were often kept, hidden, or buried with care. That habit still exists. Parents keep baby teeth without knowing why. Tooth fairy rituals soften an ancient fear. The exchange of a tooth for protection or reward is a modern echo of medieval anxiety about bodily fragments leaving the child. Names were part of the body too. Your name was not just a label, it was a handle. Knowing someone's true name gave access to them. This is why names were guarded, shortened, altered, or hidden. Children were sometimes given temporary names to confuse malevolent forces. Nicknames weren't casual. They were protective disguises. This is why saints' names mattered. This is why naming ceremonies were serious. This is why changing a name could change a fate. The fear persists. People feel oddly exposed when strangers use their full name. We instinctively soften names, abbreviate them, or keep parts private. Online usernames, nicknames, handles, these are modern protective layers. We still believe names grant access. The body was also porous. Medieval people believed the body absorbed influence constantly, from food, from air, from touch, from words. This is why certain foods were avoided during emotional states, why pregnant women were shielded from disturbing sights, why curses were feared, even if no physical harm occurred. Words could enter the body. A spoken insult could cause illness. A blessing could heal. A prayer could strengthen organs. Language wasn't abstract. It moved through flesh. Modern psychology quietly agrees. Words affect stress. Stress affects health. Trauma leaves physical marks. The medieval explanation used spirits. We use hormones. The behavior remains identical. Clothing mattered because it touched the body. Certain fabrics protected. Others weakened. Wool was grounding. Linen was purifying. Leather carried animal strength. Wearing the wrong thing at the wrong time could open you to harm. This belief still shapes us. We assign emotions to clothing. Comfort clothes, power outfits, lucky shirts. Items worn during important events feel charged afterward. We keep them. We hesitate to discard them. Sweat mattered. Sweat carried effort, fear, and intention. Sweat-soaked garments were powerful. They could repel animals, ward off pests, or be used in protective rituals. Sweat proved the body had worked, struggled, survived. Even now, we associate sweat with authenticity, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. Medieval thinking encoded effort into bodily fluids long before motivational posters existed. Saliva mattered. Spitting sealed promises, cured minor injuries, or marked territory. Saliva carried personal essence. That's why spitting on someone was deeply offensive. It wasn't disrespect, it was invasion. Modern reactions haven't changed. Spitting still feels uniquely violating compared to other gestures. It triggers disgust because it crosses a boundary older than hygiene rules. The medieval body was not separate from the environment. It exchanged substances constantly. Breath mixed with spirits. Food became temperament. Touch transferred influence. This made physical boundaries feel fragile. You guarded what left you. You guarded what entered you. This anxiety shapes modern health obsessions. We fear contamination. We sanitize. We track what we consume. We obsess over purity, toxins, and exposure. The medieval explanation was magic. The modern one is chemistry. The fear is the same. Illness wasn't random. Disease entered through imbalance. Something foreign crossed into the body and disrupted harmony. This made people suspicious of outsiders, unfamiliar foods, strange behaviors. Difference itself was a risk. That belief echoes today. New illnesses trigger fear of travel, strangers, unfamiliar customs. The instinct to isolate and protect the body as territory is ancient. Even death didn't end bodily power. A corpse still mattered. Hair, bones, blood-soaked clothing, these were potent. Relics weren't symbolic. They were physical sources of protection. Saints' bones healed because the body retained power after death. We still struggle with this idea. Human remains feel sacred. Disturbing graves feels wrong beyond law. We recoil at the idea of bodies treated as objects. That discomfort was shaped long before modern ethics. The medieval person lived in constant awareness of their physical self as both shield and vulnerability. Every fragment mattered. Every loss mattered. Every change carried risk. This mindset never truly disappeared. It adapted. It slipped into rituals disguised as tradition, superstitions masked as habits, fears softened into preferences. We no longer speak of curses, but we fear exposure. We no longer fear witches stealing hair, but we fear data breaches and DNA theft. The body is still not just a body. It is still something we protect instinctively, irrationally, deeply, because once upon a time, losing even a single piece of yourself meant losing control over your fate. The medieval home was never just shelter. It was a fragile bubble carved out of a hostile world, and every doorway, corner, and threshold was a negotiation with forces that could not be seen but were deeply felt. Protection didn't come from walls alone. It came from habits. Small, repetitive actions performed so often they stopped feeling like beliefs and started feeling like common sense. The broom was one of the most important objects in the house. Not for cleaning, at least not primarily. A broom was a boundary marker. When leaned upright behind a door or laid across a threshold, it acted as a barrier, not to dirt, but to intrusion. Spirits, bad luck, wandering influences, envy, illness, whatever you feared that day was supposed to pause at the bristles. The logic was simple. A broom was made of many bound pieces. Twigs, straw, fibers tied together. Binding confused malevolent forces. They had to count, separate, understand. And while they were distracted, dawn would come, prayers would be said, danger would pass. This belief lingered far longer than literacy. People still feel uneasy stepping over a broom. Leaving one fallen on the floor feels wrong. Propping one behind a door feels oddly intentional, even if you can't explain why. We still associate brooms with sweeping things away, bad moods, bad luck, bad energy. Cleaning before guests arrive feels less like hygiene and more like preparation. Salt was even more powerful. Salt preserved food, healed wounds, paid wages, and sealed contracts. It didn't rot. It didn't change. In a world obsessed with decay, salt felt eternal. That made it sacred. Households placed salt at thresholds, windowsills, and hearths. A thin line of it could stop what iron couldn't. Spirits, curses, and ill intentions were believed to dissolve when they touched it. Salt didn't just protect, it purified. This is why spilling salt was terrifying. You weren't just clumsy. You had broken a seal. Protection leaked out. Something could now get in. The panic wasn't symbolic. It was practical. The remedy throwing salt over your shoulder wasn't random. Evil was believed to lurk behind you, just out of sight. Tossing salt backward blinded it, burned it, or distracted it long enough for you to escape its attention. People still react instantly to spilled salt. There's a jolt of dread before logic kicks in. Even skeptics perform the gesture, just in case. The body remembers before the mind decides. Iron was the ultimate defense. Iron cut through illusion. It grounded things. It belonged to the earth, but resisted decay. Unlike wood, it didn't rot. Unlike stone, it could be shaped by human hands. That made it powerful. Iron nails were driven into door frames. Horseshoes were hung above entrances. Knives were placed under beds. Scissors were left open near cradles. All to keep something unseen from getting too close. This wasn't decoration. Iron objects created safe zones. They told whatever lurked nearby that this space was claimed, protected, watched. Even now, iron feels different. People trust it instinctively. We describe things as solid, ironclad, unbreakable. Old superstitions survive in architecture. Horseshoes on barns, iron gates on cemeteries, metal charms sold as protection. Jewelry made of iron still carries an aura of toughness and defense. Thresholds were the most dangerous places. A doorway wasn't inside or outside. It was both. That made it unstable. Anything crossing it could bring something with it. Luck, illness, spirits, intent. This is why people paused at doors. Why greetings mattered. Why gifts were sometimes handed over only after stepping fully inside. Why sweeping dirt out the front door was avoided. It risked sweeping fortune away with it. We still hesitate at thresholds. New homes get rituals. Keys are carried in deliberately. Some people refuse to shake hands across a doorway. Others feel uneasy standing half in, half out. The body senses the in-between, even if the brain dismisses it. Fireplaces were sacred zones. The hearth wasn't just heat. It was the heart of the house. Fire kept darkness away. Cooked food, dried clothes, burned dangerous objects. Ashes were saved because they remembered the fire. Throwing certain things into the fire was forbidden. Hair, nails, clothing scraps, anything too personal could release influence if burned carelessly. But burning the right thing at the right time could cleanse the entire house. Even today, fire feels ceremonial. Candles mark moments. Bonfires feel communal. Burning old letters or objects feels final, cleansing, intentional. Fire still feels like transformation, not just combustion. Beds were protected spaces. People placed knives beneath mattresses, herbs beneath pillows, iron near the headboard. Sleep was vulnerability. The soul wandered. The body was open. Nightmares weren't psychological. They were intrusions. This is why bedtime rituals mattered. Prayers, objects, arrangements. The goal was containment. Keep the night outside. Modern sleep rituals echo this. We lock doors twice. Check windows. Arrange pillows just right. Keep lights on. White noise. Comfort objects. The fear of being defenseless while unconscious never disappeared. Windows were watched carefully. They let light in, but also allowed entry. Not physical entry, something worse. Air carried influence. Smells carried illness. Sounds carried intention. People hung charms near windows. Plants, iron, salt. Curtains weren't just for privacy. They filtered what entered. This explains why people still react strongly to open windows at night. There's a sense of exposure, vulnerability, something slipping in unnoticed. Logic says it's air. Instinct says it's risk. Sweeping head rules. You didn't sweep at night. You didn't sweep over someone's feet. You didn't sweep dirt out the door after sunset. Each action risked removing protection or inviting loss. Sweeping was symbolic removal. What you swept away mattered. When you did it mattered. Who stood nearby mattered. People still feel this. Sweeping late feels wrong. Being swept over feels disrespectful. Cleaning before important events feels necessary, not optional. Tidying isn't just order, it's control. Corners mattered. Corners collected things, dust, shadows, energy. They were watched, cleaned, marked. Letting a corner grow stagnant invited trouble. This belief persists in modern language. We talk about corners of the mind, back corners, dark corners, spaces where things hide if ignored. Noise mattered too. Certain sounds protected. Bells chased danger away. Silence invited it. This is why churches rang bells constantly. Homes mimicked this with chimes, metal clinks, rhythmic sounds. We still use sound as comfort. Music in empty rooms. TVs left on. White noise machines. Silence feels unsafe. Objects were never neutral. Every item had history, use, memory. Bringing something into the house meant bringing its past with it. Second-hand objects were treated cautiously. They could carry residue. People still feel this. Some objects feel wrong without reason. Others feel comforting instantly. We talk about bad vibes from spaces and items, echoing medieval logic with modern language. The house was alive. It needed care, attention, ritual. Not all at once, but constantly. These weren't grand ceremonies. They were habits performed daily, weekly, instinctively. That's why they survived. They embedded themselves so deeply into behavior that belief became reflex. Even when the explanations faded, the actions stayed. You spill salt and react before thinking. You hang something above a door without knowing why. You feel uneasy when a broom lies wrong. You double-check locks at night. You clean before guests. You hesitate at thresholds. You are not being irrational. You are participating in a system of protection older than recorded science. A quiet inheritance passed down through gestures instead of words. And as these household rituals guarded spaces, they also shaped something deeper, how people understood luck, misfortune, and the idea that unseen forces could shape everyday life long before anything visibly went wrong. Animals were never just animals. They watched, they warned. They arrived carrying messages nobody asked for, but everyone took seriously. In a medieval world without news alerts or weather apps, the behavior of animals became the earliest warning system, a living interface between humans and whatever forces governed fate. If something bad was coming, the animals knew first. Cats were the most dangerous of all, not because they attacked, but because they observed. A cat could sit still for hours, eyes half-lidded, staring at nothing, or worse, staring at something you couldn't see. That alone made them suspicious. Medieval people trusted animals that worked. Dogs guarded, horses pulled, cows fed families. Cats, meanwhile, slipped between usefulness and independence, doing favors only when they felt like it. Black cats amplified that discomfort. Darkness already symbolized uncertainty, death, and the unknown. Combine it with an animal that moved silently, saw in the dark, and appeared immune to human authority, and you had a walking omen. If a black cat crossed your path, it wasn't coincidence, it was interference. Something had noticed you. The direction mattered. Left to right was bad. Right to left was worse. The timing mattered. Dawn, dusk, and midnight were especially dangerous. And if the cat stopped and looked at you, that was no longer an omen. That was acknowledgement. This fear didn't disappear when witch trials ended. It softened. It became humor. It became memes. People still pause when a black cat crosses the road. Shelters still report lower adoption rates for black cats. Jokes about bad luck persist because the instinct never left. The animal didn't change. Our explanations did. Crows carried heavier news. They gathered where death happened. Battlefields, gallows, roadsides, cemeteries. A crow didn't cause death. It confirmed it. Their intelligence made things worse. Crows remembered faces. They followed patterns. They returned. Seeing one crow was unsettling. 2 suggested tension. 3 meant trouble. Large groups meant something was already wrong. Their voices didn't help. Harsh, unmusical, more announcement than song. When a crow cried out near a village, people didn't ask what it was calling to. They asked what it was calling about. Modern language still betrays this fear. We don't say a group of crows lightly. We call it a murder. That word survived centuries without anyone officially approving it. It stuck because it felt right. Even now, people read meaning into crow behavior. A crow watching from a wire. A crow calling repeatedly. A crow appearing in quiet places. We joke about it, but the joke carries tension. Something about them still feels like commentary. Owls were worse. They didn't appear often, but when they did, they arrived silently. No wing sound, no warning. Just sudden presence. Their calls came at night, when everything else slept. Long, hollow sounds that didn't sound like communication so much as announcement. Owls were believed to see what humans couldn't. Death, spirits, souls in transit. If an owl perched on your roof, it wasn't there by accident. It had come for someone. Maybe not tonight, but soon. This fear embedded itself deeply. Even today, owls are admired but kept at emotional distance. People say they're beautiful, but rarely comforting. An owl appearing unexpectedly still feels eerie, especially at night. Children's stories soften them, but the unease remains underneath the feathers. And then there were dogs. Dogs were trusted until they weren't. A dog howling at night meant something was wrong. Not nearby, not visible, but coming. Dogs were believed to sense approaching death. If a dog howled without reason, someone in the household would soon fall ill. Or worse. This belief survives in subtle ways. Unexplained dog behavior still unsettles people, staring at corners, barking at nothing, refusing to enter rooms. We laugh it off, but we also check the locks. Horses sense danger too. A horse refusing to move wasn't stubborn. It was perceptive. Riders trusted horses more than maps. If a horse panicked, you listened. If it froze, you dismounted. Animals weren't dumb. They were early warning systems. Snakes carried layered meaning. They symbolized healing and danger simultaneously, renewal and betrayal. Seeing a snake wasn't always bad, but context mattered. A snake crossing a path meant change. A snake entering a home meant disruption. A snake shedding skin near a dwelling meant something old was ending. This duality survives. We still associate snakes with both medicine and menace. Logos, symbols, myths, none of it resolved the contradiction. Insects mattered too. Bees entering a house meant news. Good or bad depended on what they did next. Spiders were protective killing. One invited bad luck. Flies gathering where they shouldn't meant decay had already begun. Rats were the most honest. They went where food was, where warmth was, where survival was possible. If rats abandoned an area, people panicked. Something worse than hunger was coming. This instinct persists. Sudden animal silence still alarms people. Birds leaving before storms. Pets acting strange before disasters. We pretend it's coincidence, but we notice. Friday the 13th didn't emerge from nowhere. Friday was already unlucky, the day associated with executions, betrayals, and religious trauma. 13 disrupted order. 12 was stable. 13 broke symmetry. Add animals to that mix and superstition exploded. A black cat on a Friday? A crow on the 13th? An owl heard near dawn? These weren't jokes. They were warnings layered on warnings. Modern culture flattened this into humor, but the structure remains. Friday the 13th memes rely heavily on animals. Cats glaring, crows perched, owls watching. The joke works because the imagery still triggers something primal. We know better, but we don't feel better. Animals were never neutral observers in medieval life. They were messengers moving freely between worlds humans believed were dangerously close to overlapping. The forest, the night, the dead. And even now, when animals act strangely, our first reaction isn't scientific curiosity. It's unease. Because long before superstition became entertainment, it was survival logic. Read the animals, interpret the signs. Pay attention before it's too late. And as these omens settled into daily awareness, they reshaped something even more lasting, the way people learned to search for meaning in coincidence itself, reading patterns into random events and slowly training the human mind to expect messages hidden in the ordinary. Weather was never just weather. It didn't arrive randomly. It didn't behave neutrally. Wind, rain, thunder, and moonlight were all doing something, reacting to human behavior, responding to forgotten rules, enforcing cosmic consequences. In a medieval mind, the sky wasn't empty space. It was a ledger. And storms were written accusations. When clouds gathered too quickly, people didn't say the pressure changed. They said someone had done something wrong, missed a prayer, broken a vow, angered God, or worse, angered something pretending to be God. Thunder wasn't noise. It was warning. Lightning wasn't electricity. It was judgment choosing a target. A storm that flattened crops wasn't a tragedy. It was a message that needed decoding. Someone had offended the balance, and the weather was collecting payment. This belief didn't live on the fringes. It was mainstream. Sermons referenced it. Laws acknowledged it. Villages acted on it. If hail destroyed a harvest, the question wasn't how, it was who. Someone had caused it. That someone was often a woman. Witch storms were among the most feared acts of medieval magic. The idea was simple and terrifying. Certain people could speak to clouds, stir winds, or milk the sky until it broke. A woman muttering during a drought. A stranger seen during a sudden squall. A neighbor whose field survived while others didn't. Coincidence wasn't coincidence. It was evidence. Storms that came out of season were especially dangerous. Summer hail was unnatural. Sudden frost meant sabotage. Wind that twisted trees instead of breaking them straight felt intentional. People believed storms could be aimed. That belief led to rituals designed not to stop weather, but to redirect blame. Church bells were rung during storms, not to calm people, but to confuse demons riding the wind. Metal objects were placed outside homes to ground lightning spiritually, not physically. Holy water was flung into the sky. You weren't stopping the storm. You were negotiating with it. And if the storm didn't stop, negotiations had failed. The moon controlled more than tides. It controlled behavior. Medieval people tracked the moon obsessively. Planting, harvesting, bloodletting, surgeries all scheduled according to lunar phases. The full moon wasn't right. It was active. People believed the moon pulled at blood, bile, and madness. That's where the word lunatic comes from, not metaphor, but diagnosis. If someone behaved erratically, the explanation wasn't psychological. It was astronomical. The moon was doing something to them. Hospitals recorded spikes in agitation during full moons. Courts avoided sentencing during certain phases. Farmers avoided slaughtering animals when the moon was wrong, believing the meat would spoil faster or taste bitter. The moon wasn't passive light. It was influence. And influence demanded caution. Even now, emergency workers quietly acknowledge full moon nights feel different. Nurses report increased activity. Police joke about chaos. Parents blame behavior changes on lunar cycles. We say it jokingly, but we still say it. Storms and moons merged into a single worldview. The sky reacted to us. Weather wasn't a background system. It was feedback. Rain after prayer was confirmation. Drought after sin was correction. This belief created intense vigilance. Every strange cloud formation mattered. Rings around the moon meant sickness was coming. Red skies weren't optical phenomena, they were blood warnings. Sudden calm before storms wasn't atmospheric, it was a breath being held. People learned to read the sky like text, and they passed that literacy down. Weather folklore didn't die with science. It went underground. We still feel it when storms hit unexpectedly, when power goes out, when thunder rattles windows harder than it should. There's a moment not logical, not spoken, where the brain asks, why now? Why today? Full moons still get blamed for bad behavior, broken sleep, emotional volatility. No one fully believes it, but no one fully dismisses it either. That hesitation is inheritance. Rainbows once meant contracts. Breaking them invited disaster. Whirlwinds were believed to carry spirits. Sudden gusts through open doors were signs someone unseen had entered. Weather-shaped architecture, thick walls, small windows, heavy doors, not just for insulation but for defense. Defense against what the sky might send. Lightning rods didn't just make buildings safer. They made them feel less watched. And yet, even now, lightning striking specific places feels symbolic. Churches, trees, tall isolated structures. We still photograph it, still share it, still feel it means something. Storm names reinforce this instinct. We don't number hurricanes anymore. We name them. Naming gives personality. Personality implies intention. Weather reports dramatize systems as if they have moods. Angry fronts, calm breaks, unstable patterns. The language didn't change much. We just stopped blaming witches directly. The moon still schedules our lives quietly. Calendars mark full moons. Social media predicts mood shifts. Apps track lunar cycles. Fitness influencers time routines to phases. We pretend it's wellness, but it's ritual. Eclipses once froze cities. People hid indoors. Animals panicked. Kings delayed travel. Eclipses weren't astronomical alignments. They were interruptions. Something had reached up and touched the machinery of the heavens. Even now, eclipses stop traffic. People gather. They watch silently. They feel it. Storms, moons, weather, they trained humans to believe the universe was responsive, that events weren't isolated. That chaos had reasons, and that belief never fully left. It simply changed costumes. Because after generations of watching the sky for signs, the human mind learned something dangerous and powerful. If meaning can be found in clouds and light, it can be found anywhere. And once you learn to see patterns in the weather, you start seeing patterns in everything else. Love was never just chemistry. It was danger. It was negotiation. It was fate with witnesses. In the medieval world, romance didn't bloom naturally. It had to be coaxed, protected, steered, and sometimes outright tricked into existence. Falling in love wasn't considered spontaneous or safe. It was something that happened when the right forces aligned or when someone interfered correctly. Luck governed attraction. And luck, famously, could be manipulated. People carried charm bags the way we carry phones. Small pouches sewn from cloth, leather, or scraps of linen, filled with objects chosen not for beauty, but for influence. a lock of hair, a dried herb, a knotted thread, a coin that had passed through many hands, sometimes bone, sometimes blood, always intention. These weren't sentimental keepsakes. They were tools. A charm bag worn close to the body was believed to warm, absorb, and amplify desire. Heat activated magic. That's why charms were tied to the chest, hidden beneath clothing, or sewn into undergarments. The closer it was to skin, the stronger it worked. Love didn't come from the heart. It came from proximity. Herbs played a starring role. Rosemary for fidelity, thyme for courage, lavender to soften anger, basil to attract attention. If someone smelled right, it wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Perfume wasn't about luxury. It was persuasion. Scents were believed to travel faster than words and reach deeper than looks. A person who smelled wrong could doom a courtship instantly. A person who smelled enchanted might never know why doors kept opening for them. Knots mattered more than kisses. Love knots were everywhere, tied into cords, ribbons, belts, even hair. The act of tying was the act of binding fate. Knots locked intentions into the physical world. A poorly tied knot could ruin a relationship. An intentionally tied one could hold it together through years of hardship. Untying a knot without permission was sabotage. This is why medieval clothing was so obsessed with laces, ties, and fastenings. Buttons were rare. Knots were deliberate. Every tie was symbolic. Even now, we tie the knot without thinking about why. Rings weren't gifts. They were claims. A ring was a circle with no break eternity captured in metal. Wearing one wasn't romantic. It was public proof that someone had already laid spiritual claim to you. Removing it wasn't just emotional. It was dangerous. Bare fingers invited interference. That's why rings were worn constantly, even during sleep, even during work, even in death. Rings sealed bonds against tampering, both human and otherwise. Bouquets weren't about beauty either. Flowers masked smell. Bodies didn't smell good. Weddings were crowded, warm, and often held in seasons when bathing was limited. Flowers covered decay, sweat, fear, and illness. But they also carried symbolism. Each flower sent a message. Some attracted love. Some warded jealousy. Some were meant to keep evil spirits distracted while vows were spoken. Throwing the bouquet wasn't celebration. It was dispersal. If the flowers carried leftover luck or danger, you wanted it gone. Tossing it transferred whatever lingered onto someone else. Catching it wasn't fortune. It was a responsibility. Even today, people scramble for it. Courtship wasn't private. It couldn't be. Love left openings. Openings attracted attention. Attention attracted interference. Families watched closely. Neighbors whispered. Communities monitored relationships like shared property. Too much affection was suspicious. Too little was dangerous. Balance was everything. People avoided praising their lovers too openly. Compliments invited envy. Envy invited curses. Better to downplay happiness than advertise it. That habit still lives in the way people hedge joy. I'm happy, but things are going well. Knock on wood. Knocking on wood isn't superstition. It's residue. Love magic wasn't always gentle. Some charms were coercive. Powders slipped into drinks. Words whispered while someone slept. Names written backward. Rituals timed to moon phases. Consent wasn't part of the conversation. Success was. If love could be influenced, it could be forced. That belief didn't disappear. It softened. It dressed itself up as manifesting an attraction energy. But the structure stayed. Astrology controlled compatibility, not because stars were romantic, but because they were impartial. Blame couldn't be placed on people if the heavens said no. We still ask about signs. We still check charts. We still excuse failures with cosmic explanations. Timing mattered more than intention. Certain days were good for proposals. Others doomed them. Fridays were risky. Full moons volatile. Certain saints' days blessed unions. Others cursed them. People delayed weddings for months, waiting for the right alignment. Even now, couples choose dates carefully. Avoid certain numbers. Seek symmetry. Trust vibes. That instinct isn't modern. It's ancient. Love letters weren't casual. Writing someone's name fixed them. Letters were burned after reading or hidden carefully. Leaving words loose risked interception by people or forces. Ink was power. Paper remembered. That's why even today, breakups feel more final when written. Texts hurt differently than spoken words. Written language still carries weight. Courtship gifts followed rules. Shoes meant departure. Knives meant severance. Gloves meant challenge. Apples meant desire. Bread meant sustenance and commitment. Giving the wrong item sent the wrong message, and messages mattered. Modern gift anxiety isn't new. It's inherited fear of miscommunication with consequences. Luck hovered over everything. People avoided weddings during storms, avoided red skies, avoided eclipses, avoided anything that suggested the universe wasn't paying attention. Because if the universe wasn't watching, something else might be. We still photograph weddings obsessively, still document them, still seek proof that the moment happened correctly. Proof reassures us nothing interfered. Even now, love rituals persist. Engagement rings, bachelor parties, bridal showers, matching outfits, first dances, tosses, knots, signs. We tell ourselves their tradition, their protection. Because somewhere deep, inherited, and unspoken, we still believe love is fragile, that happiness attracts attention, that bonds need reinforcement, and that luck, real or imagined, has a say. So we knock on wood, we wear rings, we throw flowers, we ask the stars. We perform small acts with big confidence, not because we're foolish, because for centuries, love survived by ritual, and we never really stopped believing it needed help. Death was never an ending. It was a process, a negotiation, a window of vulnerability where mistakes could echo for generations. In the medieval mind, the moment someone died was not a clean break. The soul lingered, the body lingered, the house itself lingered in danger. What happened in the hours immediately after death mattered more than the death itself, because that was when rules applied. The dead were not assumed to leave quietly. They needed guidance, structure, boundaries. Without them, they wandered, and wandering souls were rarely friendly. This is why mirrors became dangerous. A mirror wasn't just glass, it was depth, a surface that could trap reflections, distort them, or worse, invite something to step through. When a person died in a house, mirrors were covered immediately. Cloth was thrown over them without ceremony, not to protect the living from seeing themselves, to protect the dead from getting lost. It was believed the soul, confused and newly unanchored, might see its reflection and mistake it for another world, or become trapped between images, or recognize itself and refuse to move on. Even worse, a living person might see the dead reflected where they shouldn't be. Seeing wasn't passive. It was participation. That's why even today, covering mirrors after a death still feels instinctive, even when people can't explain why. The discomfort is older than reason. Candles weren't for light. They were for direction. A flame gave the soul a path. It showed which way was forward, which way was safe. Darkness wasn't absence. It was congestion. Souls could gather there, drift, overlap. A single candle at the head of the body was essential. Multiple candles marked territory. Too many candles risked attracting attention from things that weren't invited. Fire was a signal flare. People watched flames carefully. A steady burn meant peace. Flickering meant unrest. A candle going out on its own was panic-worthy. That meant interruption. Someone would relight it immediately, often while whispering reassurance, not prayers, but instructions. Go. Continue. Don't stay. The body itself became dangerous once empty. It was washed not for cleanliness, but for closure. Dirt held memory. Sweat held effort. Blood held intention. Leaving those behind made it easier for the soul to detach. Hair and nails were handled with care, never thrown away, often buried with the body or burned. Loose pieces were invitations. This is why even now, people hesitate to throw away personal remains connected to the dead. There's an instinct to contain, not discard. The mouth was sometimes bound shut, not for appearance, for silence. Open mouth suggested unfinished words, regret, calls back. An open mouth could speak again, or breathe again, or invite something else in. Coins placed on eyes weren't payment. They were anchors, weight to keep the gaze downward, to prevent the dead from watching the living leave the room. Because if they watched you go, they might follow. Doors and windows mattered enormously. A window was often opened immediately after death, not for air, for exit. Souls needed a clear path. If trapped indoors too long, they might settle. Closing the window too early was a mistake. Leaving it open too long was worse. The timing mattered. Everything had a window, literal and symbolic. Staircases were avoided. Thresholds watched. People stepped carefully around the body, never over it. Crossing over risked entanglement. That's why even now, stepping over someone feels wrong. The body remembers rules the mind forgot. Funerals weren't about grief. They were about control. Noise mattered. Silence mattered more. Too much crime could confuse the soul. Too little could offend it. Mourners were expected to show sorrow, but not despair. Despair was selfish. It encouraged the dead to stay. Clothing was chosen carefully. Black absorbed. White confused. Red was dangerous. Patterns could distract. Simplicity kept focus. The dead were carried feet first. Always. Never head first. Head first implied return. Even today, carrying someone out feet first feels automatic. Graves were not permanent. They were temporary arrangements in crowded landscapes of death. Bodies shifted. Bones were moved. Space was reused. This wasn't disrespect. It was necessity. But walking on graves was avoided. Not out of politeness. Because pressure mattered. Disturbing the ground could disturb what rested beneath. Especially if the burial was recent. Especially if the death was sudden. That's why even now, people instinctively step lightly in cemeteries, even when paths are paved. Ghosts weren't rare. They were expected. Most spirits weren't evil. They were incomplete, something undone, a message unsent, a ritual skipped, a boundary crossed. They appeared near homes, crossroads, bridges, places of transition. They followed routines, sat where they once sat, walked where they once walked. Ghost stories weren't entertainment. They were warnings. Do this properly, or this happens. That's why bells were rung. Loud, sharp sounds broke attachment, disoriented lingering spirits, reminded them they no longer belonged. Church bells weren't just calls to prayer. They were sonic fences. Even now, sudden loud sounds during grief feel jarring. Somewhere deep, the body still flinches. Remembering noise is separation. Children were especially vulnerable. Their souls were considered loosely attached, even while alive. Too much exposure to death could pull them toward it. They were kept away from bodies, from funerals, from graves. Yet paradoxically, they were also believed to see more, to notice what adults couldn't. A child staring into an empty corner after a death was taken seriously. Even today, people get uneasy when children talk about seeing someone who's gone. Food rituals followed death closely. Meals were shared not to comfort the living, but to anchor them. Eating grounded the body, reminded it where it belonged. A body that stopped eating risked following the dead. Certain foods were avoided, others encouraged. Bread was common, soup, warm, simple things. Alcohol was used cautiously. Too much loosened boundaries. This is why funeral food traditions persist, why people bring meals, why eating after loss still feels necessary. Names became dangerous. Saying the dead person's name too often risked summoning attention. Too little risked offense. Balance mattered. Some names weren't spoken for years. Others were whispered only. Some were given to children later, deliberately, to recycle identity safely. We still hesitate to say certain names out loud. Time after death was structured. 40 days mattered. A year mattered. Anniversaries mattered. These weren't emotional milestones, they were checkpoints. Was the soul settled yet? If strange things happened around those dates, it meant unfinished business. Even now, people feel heightened emotion around anniversaries without knowing why. The rules never fully disappeared. They softened, changed clothes, lost explanations. But we still avoid mirrors in grief, still lower voices near graves, still feel watched in quiet rooms after someone dies, still explain strange sounds as nothing while feeling it's not. Because for centuries, death wasn't distant. It was present, observant, rule-bound. And the rules taught people how to live carefully around absence, how to move forward without dragging the past behind them. Not to end death, but to survive it. Honey was medicine because wounds healed faster with it. That worked, so honey became sacred. Willow bark reduced pain. That worked, so trees held answers. That instinct hasn't faded. Modern wellness thrives on agency. People want to do something, take something, wear something, adjust something. Written charms evolved into affirmations. Herbal remedies evolved into supplements. Amulets evolved into crystals. The shape changed, the function didn't. Fear needed a face. Illness had one. Storms had one. Misfortune, accidents, envy, sudden loss, none of these were allowed to remain abstract for long. In medieval thinking, danger didn't drift randomly through the world. It looked for openings. And when something went wrong without a clear cause, people didn't ask what happened. They asked who looked at you. This is where the witch and the evil eye took shape, not as fairy tale villains, but as explanations for vulnerability. The evil eye wasn't about hatred alone. It was about attention. Too much of it, aimed the wrong way. Envy was considered active, almost physical. A glance could bruise. A compliment could curdle luck. Praise without protection was dangerous, especially for children, animals, crops, or anything newly acquired. If someone admired your cow too openly, and it died the next week, the connection felt obvious. The solution wasn't confrontation. It was insulation. You didn't stop people from looking. You made sure their gaze couldn't reach you intact. Protection culture grew from this logic. Blue glass, reflective surfaces, twisted iron, knotted thread, all designed to interrupt intention. The eye symbol itself became a counter-eye, a watcher that watched back. If harm traveled through sight, then sight could be blocked, confused, redirected. That's why reflective charms mattered. Mirrors didn't just show you yourself. They bounced danger away. Witch bottles worked on the same principle. They were traps. Small glass bottles filled with sharp objects, hair, nails, urine, personal materials buried beneath thresholds or hidden in walls. The idea wasn't to ward off harm politely. It was to catch it. Ill intent entered the house, followed the personal markers, and got stuck. Pain for pain, binding for binding. Modern sensibilities recoil at the ingredients, but the logic is recognizable. Protection had to be personal. Generic defenses were weak. The bottle worked because it contained you. The same instinct explains why people today are more comforted by customized protection birthstones, personalized jewelry, objects chosen for you than mass-produced safety. Hex signs followed a different strategy. Where bottles trapped, symbols warned. Painted on barns, doors, cradles, they combined geometry, color, and repetition. Circles for containment, stars for order, tulips for life, hearts for continuity. These weren't decorative in intent. They were visual fences. Order imposed on chaos. Symmetry was safety. The more precise the pattern, the stronger the barrier. This belief in pattern as protection hasn't disappeared. People still feel calmer in orderly spaces. We trust symmetry instinctively. We describe good vibes as balance, bad energy as disruption. Medieval homes used symbols, where modern ones use design principles. Same instinct, different vocabulary. The witch, meanwhile, wasn't always female, but she was always local. Danger came from nearby, not distant lands. The witch lived on the edge of the village, socially or physically. Someone who didn't follow the same rhythms. Someone alone. Someone who knew things without formal permission. Witchcraft accusations often followed conflict, arguments, debts, rejections. The witch explained social tension without resolving it. That's important. Blame could exist without confrontation. Protection could be installed quietly. No accusation required. Witch bottles were buried secretly. Charms were worn discreetly. Defense was private. That privacy still defines modern protection culture. People don't announce why they wear certain symbols. They just wear them. Blue-eye pendants work because they're ambiguous. Stylish enough to pass, symbolic enough to reassure. The Hamsa hand follows the same path. Open palm, stop sign, blessing and barrier at once. Its popularity today mirrors medieval logic perfectly. It's visible without being aggressive. It says protected without saying afraid. Protection culture thrives where fear is constant but unspoken. The medieval world was saturated with risk, disease, famine, violence, but daily life demanded functionality. You couldn't live in panic. You lived in layers. Protective objects were layers. So are modern ones. Insurance, locks, passwords, charms didn't eliminate danger. They made it feel manageable. The evil eye belief spread easily because it didn't require malice. Anyone could harm you unintentionally. That made everyone a potential risk. Compliments were softened. Praise was followed by blessings. God willing, with luck. Even now, people instinctively hedge joy. Knock on wood. Don't jinx it. That's medieval etiquette surviving intact. Knock on wood isn't nonsense. It's interruption. Break the flow. Reset the moment. Wood was sacred, living, protective. Today, it's furniture. The action remains. Witchcraft wasn't always dramatic. Most protection was boring, repetitive, habitual. Hanging iron near doors. Red thread around wrists. Turning shoes upside down when left outside. Small acts layered daily. This is how habits form. Repetition makes belief durable. Modern protection rituals follow the same rule. Wearing the same necklace every day. Touching a ring when nervous. Carrying an object, just in case. The object doesn't need power. The habit does. Witch bottles were often placed under hearths or thresholds, the points of entry. Medieval people understood boundaries instinctively. Doors, windows, chimneys. Today, boundaries are digital, psychological, emotional. But the urge to guard entry points persists. We lock phones. We filter information. We curate exposure. Same impulse. The witch and the evil eye weren't just threats. They were systems. Systems that explained why good people suffered and why precautions mattered. Protection culture gave people a role in preventing disaster, even when outcomes were uncontrollable. That's powerful. That's why these symbols never disappear. They resurface whenever uncertainty spikes. Economic stress, pandemics, social change. You see more charms, more rituals, more energy cleansing. Not because people are less rational, but because control feels thinner. Medieval protection culture didn't promise safety. It promised participation. You did something. You weren't passive. Blue eye pendants trend because they're simple, visible, culturally flexible. They require no belief statement, just presence. The same way witch bottles required no conversation. They worked quietly. Modern protection culture prefers subtlety. Symbols that blend into fashion. Meanings that stay optional. That ambiguity is a feature, not a flaw. It allows belief without exposure. The medieval world taught people that danger doesn't announce itself, so protection shouldn't either. That lesson stuck. Fear didn't live in medieval people the way it lives in us today, as a background hum occasionally spiked by news alerts. It lived in the foreground. It had texture, sound, smell. It creaked at night, coughed in the walls, whispered through drafts under doors. And because it was constant, it didn't feel exceptional. It felt normal. That is the part we forget. Medieval fear wasn't panic. It was environment. You woke up inside it. You learned inside it. Your brain grew around it. And brains that grow in certain conditions don't forget those conditions just because centuries pass. Modern psychology talks about imprinting how early. Repeated exposure shapes instinctive responses long after the original threat is gone. Medieval fear imprinted itself deeply because it was reinforced daily. Illness arrived without warning. Weather destroyed livelihoods overnight. Death wasn't a future concept. It was a neighbor. When unpredictability becomes routine, the mind adapts not by relaxing, but by scanning, constantly. Hypervigilance becomes baseline. This isn't weakness. It's survival. And that survival wiring didn't disappear when plumbing improved or microscopes arrived. It got inherited. Human brains don't reset every generation. They optimize. They pass along shortcuts. Pattern recognition strengthens. Threat detection becomes faster, even when threats change shape. Medieval people learned to see intention in randomness because randomness was dangerous. A storm wasn't just weather. It was judgment, warning, imbalance. Today we call that magical thinking. But neurologically, it's the same mechanism that makes modern humans search for meaning in market crashes, pandemics, or personal misfortune. The brain hates chaos. It would rather believe in a wrong cause than no cause at all. Fear also trained memory. Medieval stories weren't entertainment first. They were data storage. Ghost stories taught where not to walk. Witch stories taught who not to trust. Omens taught what to avoid. Fear sharpened recall. A calm brain forgets. A threatened brain remembers. That's why the most persistent cultural stories are fear-shaped. Even now, horror genres recycle medieval anxieties almost intact. Darkness, contamination, possession, isolation, unseen watchers. We don't invent new fears. We remix old ones with better lighting. There's also the body component. Medieval fear wasn't abstract. It was physical. Hunger hurt. Cold hurt. Infection hurt. Fear was felt in the gut, lungs, joints. That matters because embodied fear leaves different traces than imagined fear. It teaches the nervous system to respond before language kicks in. Jump at a noise. Distrust silence. Read faces quickly. These reactions don't require belief. They require memory. And memory lives in the body as much as the mind. That's why rational reassurance often fails. You can know something is safe and still feel wrong about it. Medieval fear didn't operate at the level of logic. It operated at the level of sensation. Smells meant disease. Sounds meant danger. Darkness meant exposure. Modern humans still respond the same way. We fear what we can't see. We mistrust what feels off. We react faster than we can explain. That's not regression. That's inheritance. Even social fear patterns persist. Medieval communities survived by cohesion. Difference was risky. Outsiders brought unknown variables. Today we frame that as prejudice or tribalism, but its roots lie in survival math. When one sick traveler could infect a village, caution wasn't cruelty. It was defense. The emotional reflex to be wary of unfamiliar behavior, language, norms formed under conditions where curiosity could kill. That reflex didn't vanish. It got layered over with ethics, education, law. But under stress, it resurfaces quickly. That's not ideology. That's ancient wiring reasserting priority. Time itself was experienced differently under medieval fear. Without clocks, days were shaped by light, bells, rituals. Time felt circular, not linear. Seasons returned threats predictably. Plague came back. Famine came back. War came back. That cyclical expectation trained people to wait for disaster even during calm. Modern anxiety often has the same texture anticipatory, looping, never fully relieved. We call it stress. Medieval people called it realism. Importantly, medieval fear wasn't constant terror. It was managed fear. Rituals, symbols, routines existed to keep fear functional. Not gone, contained. That's the difference. Fear was allowed, but bounded. That's why protection culture mattered so much. It gave fear a place to sit. Today, many people feel overwhelmed not because fear is new, but because it lacks containers. Medieval life had too many dangers, but also too many rituals. Modern life has fewer dangers and fewer shared rituals. Fear floats. When people today gravitate toward symbolic protection, superstition-adjacent habits, or ritualized wellness practices, they're not reverting. They're compensating. The brain remembers that fear needs structure. Medieval systems provided it through belief. Modern systems struggle to replace it meaningfully. Data doesn't soothe the nervous system. Patterns do. Actions do. Repetition does. That's why people still knock on wood, even when they know better. The body learned that interruption equals safety. Fear also shaped identity. Medieval people didn't think of themselves as autonomous individuals first. They were nodes in a network family, village, faith. Isolation was dangerous. Survival required belonging. Modern loneliness hurts not just emotionally, but physically, because the brain equates isolation with vulnerability. That equation was written long before social media. Fear taught humans that being alone meant exposure. We still carry that equation, even in crowded cities. Children absorbed medieval fear early, not through lectures, but through atmosphere. Stories whispered at night. Rules that didn't need explanation. Don't go there. Don't touch that. Don't say certain names. Fear was educational. Today we try to shield children from fear while living in systems that still trigger it. The mismatch creates confusion. The body feels danger. The language says safety. Medieval children had alignment. Modern ones have contradiction. And then there's death. Medieval fear never separated life from death cleanly. They coexisted. Cemeteries were central. Corpses were familiar. Mortality wasn't hidden. That proximity normalized fear without eliminating it. Modern culture hides death, then acts surprised when fear spikes uncontrollably. Medieval people expected fear and built lives around it. We expect comfort and treat fear as failure. The nervous system doesn't agree. So medieval fear lives inside us not as belief, but as reflex, as pattern hunger, as boundary obsession, as ritual craving, as discomfort with randomness, as the need to explain, even badly, as the instinct to protect before understanding. These are not relics. They are operating systems. They activate most clearly when modern certainties wobble during crises, transitions, loss. Fear doesn't disappear when threats change. It migrates. It updates skins. The medieval world trained humans to live with uncertainty by embedding fear into culture, routine, and body. We inherited that training. We just forgot the curriculum. Medieval superstitions didn't survive because people were foolish. They survived because they worked, at least emotionally. They gave structure to fear, meaning to chaos, and rules to a world that rarely explained itself. When science was absent, ritual stepped in. When certainty was impossible, symbolism offered control. Those habits didn't vanish when knowledge improved. They settled deeper, into instinct rather than belief. What lingers today isn't the superstition itself, but the psychological framework behind it. The human brain still searches for patterns, still clings to rituals during uncertainty, still reaches for symbolic protection when logic feels insufficient. We knock on wood, avoid cursed numbers, carry charms, check signs, not because we think the universe is magical, but because part of us remembers a time when assuming it wasn't could be fatal. The medieval world trained humans to live alert, interpret everything, and prepare for invisible threats. Modern life may look different, but the nervous system hasn't been fully updated. Fear still wants containers. Meaning still wants stories. Control still wants rituals. So when ancient beliefs resurface in modern forms, it isn't regression, it's memory. A quiet inheritance passed down through centuries of survival. Medieval people didn't just leave us castles, manuscripts, and myths. They left us a way of feeling the world. And whether we notice it or not, that feeling is still with us.